Hello, everyone. Good to be back with you. Today, I welcome the first young speaker from Pakistan on this channel. I'm really glad that she has agreed to come here because this is one more step in fulfilling my idea that this is a Desi channel. It's not a channel for Indians, it's a Desi channel, which means India and its neighboring countries all treated equally. And it's a channel for young people in what I call as the L7 countries: Bhutan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Afghanistan, Pakistan, which makes the acronym BIB SNAP, to connect with each other, to talk to each other, and to talk about themselves so that others can understand where they are, what they are going through, what their hopes are, what their frustrations are, what their ambition is. So they are not represented just as people from Bangladesh didn't represent Bangladesh. She's not representing Pakistan. She's talking about herself. It is not a formal international forum. It is an informal, friendly meeting. So with that, I'm really glad that Sumaira Waseem has agreed to be here. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Sumaira.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sumaira Waseem, and if you rearrange the letters of my first name, you get the word samurai, which is kind of what I usually loved as a child. I loved watching samurai shows. I loved watching Japanese shows, and it's something that I got into as a child very early on, and that also kind of is a very good segue into how I got into languages and cultures and just people in general. It may come to you as a surprise, but I am actually a law graduate. I'd never intended to study law. I was a very quiet child up till the age of 16, I believe. A very, very quiet child, a very reserved child who just wanted to hide behind her mother's shalwar, skirt, whatever she was wearing. And I just wanted to hide away from the public's eye, or anyone's eye for that matter. It just seemed too overbearing and too overwhelming. And so as I started my school years, I was still a very reserved child, and I think the real sudden shift came.
Sumaira, which city was this in? Which city were you in?
So I was born, this is interesting because I was born in Karachi, but that was only because my maternal grandparents lived there, and my mother came there for the delivery and all, and she also rested there for a couple of months while she was pregnant with me. But we moved back to Rawalpindi, which is very close to the capital. It's like a sister city or a twin city to the capital. So I lived all my life in Rawalpindi, but I used to go to Karachi for summer break, whenever there was break, winter break, summer break. I just used to get, my mother just took the chance and flew us to Karachi anytime she could. Because my grandparents lived there, my uncle used to live there. Well, most of our family did live there. So we used to get, just hop on a plane and then go to Karachi. And I have very fond memories of Karachi because I would always go and visit the beach. I would always go and hang around the apartments. We had lots of apartments in Karachi, so it's kind of a very distinctive feature, especially when compared to Rawalpindi, where you'll see more houses than flats and apartments. Where was I? Oh, yes. So it was back in 6th grade. I was to be honest, I was a very timid child, someone who was very below average in studies, sports, just average or either below average. And I think it was in 6th grade when I'm not sure how, but I got 5th place, 4th or 5th place. I don't actually remember, but my name was on the board, the whiteboard, and that kind of sort of really encouraged me into studying a bit more, because that was some recognition that I seemed to have craved for, and that prompted me into studying, into getting more involved with my studies. Then later, in 9th grade, my parents asked me if I was ready to move to another school. I just started adjusting myself to school life, to academic life, to understanding academic rigor. And when the sudden suggestion was made, I was at that moment, I despaired the idea of leaving, because that meant change, and I'm someone who doesn't really like change, and that will also come to you as a surprise when later I tell you about this whole story of mine up till the age of 25, at the current moment, till the current moment. But yes, I hated change. I didn't want to leave. I was finally a part of a place, an institution other than the home institution. I just wanted to continue being there. But a part of me also craved something more, because my parents suggested the idea of switching to Cambridge examinations from the matriculation examinations in Pakistan. So we have two systems, board examinations. Basically, in Pakistan we have the local national board and we have the international board by Cambridge. So they asked me for my opinion, and I did mention I was a very fearful child and I didn't want to disagree with my parents. So while I was still sad, I agreed, and that's how I was placed in another school, and that's how another track to my story started. And it was really sudden, because I started my IGCSE or O-level journey, whatever you may call it, very mid-year. I started in January 27th, a day after my birthday, and it was only 5 months before the year was supposed to end. So I had all of this backlog that I had to study. I'd never studied a book regarding Cambridge International Examinations of biology, chemistry, or physics, or anything for that matter. And so that just seemed too much for me at that moment. But I knew that I had to, because my admission it didn't take a long time, but it was difficult, because teachers were kind of convincing my mother not to enroll me into that school, because they did say that it would be difficult for someone who hadn't really studied Cambridge or a single book of Cambridge to suddenly enroll and then be faced with the IGCSEs, the dreaded IGCSEs, just a year after enrollment. Just a year after enrollment. And while my mother did acknowledge that, she knew that this was the only chance I had. If not, I would have to study matriculation. She was a really dedicated learner, and she just wanted to push us to the right, or at least what she seemed the right direction. So I did that.
When you say us, Sumaira, when you say us, who's us?
So us includes my siblings. I have 2 younger siblings. I'm the eldest, which will again come as a surprise because of the daring acts that I've pulled off, and the trouble that I've caused my parents. So yes, I have 2 younger siblings, 1 younger sister and 1 younger brother. And so our mother was so we were all very, how should I put it? We were always under the care of our mother, and we've always done things together. And when we were kind of suddenly thrust into this new situation, it just seemed odd for her to not be there. So she did really help us along the way, and I did need help too, a lot of it actually. My brother had just started school back then, I believe, and he was a very quiet child himself, so our mother had too much on our hands already. But then I also needed help, so she did come along and help me with my work and studies. Well, that was resolved quite early on. I think in 4 or 5 months I was able to cover everything. I was able to cover 3 years worth of studies and books. I was able to do that in 4 or 5 months, I believe. 4 months for
very impressive.
Yeah, so yes, with my mother actually. So we were able to cover all of that. It was really horrible in the beginning, because my teachers would always call my mother and tell her that, tell her how much I was dreading it, how much I was fearing just to write a simple sentence, because I was a very fearful child. I just didn't want to be criticized, so I wouldn't write. I also had paper exam phobia. Whenever I'd look at a paper, I just freeze, and then they'd call my mother, and then my mother would kind of calm me down, and then slowly I still haven't overcome my exam phobia, yeah, to point it out. I still have trouble with exams, because whenever I see an exam paper in front of me, it just seems like a very I don't know, it just seems like a very, very overwhelming process of just writing, even writing down your name and starting it. So when the timer starts, or when the teacher tells you about how much time is left, that just gets my heart. That just quickens my heart, and I just feel very sweaty, and I never calm down. So I'm always either chewing on my lower lip, either moving my spectacles up and down, just to distract myself from possibly the time. And so that I still have trouble with that, to be honest. I am trying to recover from it, though, overcoming it in small steps, baby steps, I hope. So that happened. I graduated. So the graduation is later. So I completed my IGCSEs, went straight to A levels, which was an even more horrid thing, to something I had never imagined before. That was also very difficult, because I'd imagined something at least similar to IGCSEs, or if not similar, then at least, well, not too difficult.
Yeah,
as it had been.
yeah.
But that also startled me, the papers and everything. But thankfully, I completed my A levels in time, for me to graduate in time, actually. And then in 2015, a month before the results, you're supposed to, a month or two before the results come out, you're supposed to apply to different universities. And that I did. I was still very much confused about my career trajectory, because I'd always seen people in my family and even outside pursuing a medical degree or an engineering degree, and these were considered the most prominent degrees, or rather the only degrees that mattered. The rest just seemed to have collapsed into a very general category called the arts.
Yeah.
And yes, so that happened, and I didn't want to be criticized for anything, so I don't know, it just seemed very natural for me to go towards medicine, because that's what all my female cousins had pursued. That's all what my friends were talking about, were always hoping to get into a medical college, especially particularly a public medical college, not a private one, because obviously that costs much more money. And yes, so I did sit for an exam. That didn't really go well for me, because again, exam phobia, and because after A levels, you kind of understand, even though I did prepare for the MCAT, it came after finishing that test, it occurred to me how very different it was from A levels biology, and very much of 12th grade biology as well. It was completely a very different paper. It required you to memorize so many things, so many names, so many I don't know, so many body parts and so many internal organs and veins and, well, all that kind of stuff. And I was then again, I knew for a fact that I would never be able to place, but I still had hope to be placed in, well, in one college, if not. So that there was hope. I did keep that hope up until the result announcement, and sadly I wasn't placed in any of the university lists. I was upset, thoroughly upset actually, because that was the only thing I'd known. And when that really didn't happen, everything just started crashing down. Everything that I had hopes for, everything that I had dreamt of, just completely was very much
Okay.
Was very much, I don't know, but it just kind of got suddenly it dissipated.
It was like
And
the first major failure you faced, right? Till
no,
then.
that wasn't the first major failure,
Okay.
Dr. Mathur. I faced so many, but yes, I think that was the first major failure. But
Yeah.
I'd also did
Because you
not do that
overcame,
by,
you know, when you shifted school in 4 months, you learned 5 years worth. So that was a major success. And then you said you hated A levels, but you did well. So it wasn't a failure. And now I'm hearing, oh my God, suddenly I have failed. So it
oh yes,
looks
that
like
is true.
it looks like the first major failure. And when we hit that, we really all feel a shock. So I'm not surprised that you felt a shock at that time when you're saying everything collapsed. Well, it does when you hit your first major failure. So, but anyway, let's go ahead.
It was because all my friends had gotten into, well, they hadn't all gotten into medical universities, but I wasn't comparing myself to them, and that was my own path. And I just had a goal, and I just wanted to reach that goal as soon as possible. And so when that didn't pull through, I was very much distraught. All the teenage rebellion that was kind of that was kind of shelved somewhere inside me, came out, because I wasn't a very rebellious teenager. But all of that came after this sudden announcement of results and that's when I became a very late. So that stage was when my late teenage rebellious nature came in, and I became a very temperamental and a very impatient daughter to my parents and just to everyone. And that's when I knew. So after that, after 2 days, my parents called me and asked me what I'd planned on doing next. Now that I had failed the exam, so they gave me multiple options. They gave me what options did they give me? There were plenty: business administration, architecture, sociology, cultural studies, political philosophy. But you name it, and they mentioned it all. And I kind of asked for a day. I asked them for a single day to think about it, because I still hadn't recovered from that shock, and I just needed more time to think about where I was headed. So I took that time, and I think it was during the night after 8 p.m. that I suddenly recalled a movie that I had watched a few months back. It was a Taiwanese drama, actually. It was a Taiwanese drama, a Taiwanese legal drama. And that kind of prompted me into thinking about studying law as a prospective bachelor's degree. So I thought about it for a while, for about 15 minutes. And then next day I went up to my parents and told them about it. And their faces were completely shocked. They were completely pale, because I'm not sure what it's like in India, but I'm assuming it's the same. But for a female to study law at that time, especially in Pakistan, was considered not appropriate, because I'm not sure, because the court systems and how sexual harassment, or how harassment in general, was very common for female lawyers, and how it wasn't really a stable career. Law itself, studying law itself isn't a very sustainable or a reliable career. And so that worried my mother a lot, because she had thought that I would choose something else, something that would land me in a school and well, probably she probably saw me as a teacher, and a teacher is a very respectable profession, and a profession that is somewhat stable, if not completely stable, and it provides you I think the right paycheck and the right security from, I don't know, from being from unemployment and from a sudden and after retirement, you are given, if at a public school, you are given enough retirement funds. So I think she had that in mind. But when I proposed this to her, she tried to talk me out of it. And I did mention just a few minutes back that I just started my late teenage rebellion, so I wasn't really listening to her. And well, she continued, and I persisted as well. The time came when I had to sit for the admission exam, entrance exam, and I convinced my mother into letting me go, and I did go there. I sat for the exam. I just told her that I was just going and we'll see, because I told her that I would only sit for one exam or at only one university. I was just very furious at myself, at everyone, so I just wanted to give it a go and see if it worked. I promised my mother that if it didn't, I'd study for another year for the medical exam, because as a Pakistani Desi mother, she always had her sights set on a medicine degree or a medical degree. So that was that. And then I sat for the exam, I got my results, and I was admitted into the program. And that's when I told my mother that I would be starting my university degree as a law student. She took it.
And where was this law university? What's the name?
Bahria University, Islamabad campus. So it has 3 campuses, and I got enrolled in the Islamabad campus.
Is that sort of the top or prestigious, or where does it stand?
I think it stands at a much better position now than it did before, because they only started their law program in 2009, fairly early. So you could say they're now at a much better position than they were before. But so it was the only university that I actually decided on, because my mother wouldn't really let me study at a university that was not in Islamabad or Rawalpindi. So I lived in Rawalpindi, but I was allowed to go to Islamabad because it's just 30 minutes, a 30-minute car drive from my place.
Okay, so you didn't have to stay away from home.
No, and that's why she agreed.
Okay.
But there is a twist to it, Dr. Mathur.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wanted some space for myself. I had already decided on this, and I just didn't want to I wanted to be really committed to what I had decided. So I told my mother that I wanted to stay at the university's dormitory, which obviously upset my mother, because I proposed my decision of moving away for a bit, because I just wanted to study. I just wanted to understand my life. Everything had just simply started and then ended, and it just all came rushing back. And then so I was always back and forth, and I just wanted a place where I could just consider and just introspect and understand what had actually happened. I told my mother of my decision of going to the dormitory, and she somehow relented. And I moved to the dormitory, I think 2 days before my university started. And I spent 3 years. So it's a 5-year law degree program in Pakistan. And so I spent 3 years at the dormitory. at the university's dormitory. I would sometimes come back for the weekends. I would come back on Friday or Saturday and then stay for a day or half a day and then return back to the dormitory on Sunday evening. And that's how usually I used to go about for the next 3 years. And then in the last 2 years, I moved back because I saw that there was a gap between me and my siblings. And I didn't want that to persist. So I made the decision of moving back because I wanted to spend time with my siblings. I knew that the academic commitment was very important, but I had also very strong ties to my sister and my brother, and so I just didn't want to leave any gaps or holes there, because I knew I had been missing out on various things, on watching movies, on playing, on going out. So I made the decision of going back, and then so many things happened in those 5 years. In my third year, or was it towards the end of my second year? I think it was 3 months before before the start of my third year, that I was in the law library when a few seniors across me were talking about student exchange program. And I didn't mean to listen into the conversation, but I did. Well, they were loud enough for me to overhear them. So I did unintentionally listen. And that's when they were talking about this very strange but oddly exciting exchange program by the South Korean government called the Korean Government Invitation Program. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. And I'd never heard about it either. So after retiring to my own dormitory room that day, I looked it up on Google and found it on the embassy's website, and it was true that they had opened applications for the Korean Government Invitation Program, which was like a student exchange program, an 11-day student exchange program. And like Japanese, I was also very much invested in other languages and cultures, and I had studied a bit of Korean culture and language, and so I went ahead and applied. But they also wanted me to kind of send them a copy of my passport. And I clearly remember then that my passport had expired. And so my mother hurriedly came rushing to my dormitory, and then we went to the office together. And there was only 3 days left before the deadline. When I first looked it up on the website that day. So she came rushing in the next day. We went to the office, got that receipt. Obviously, we weren't able to get the passport, but we were able to get a receipt of them having received the application form and everything. So we used that. We attached it to the application form. It wasn't a digital application form then, so they required us to print out the application form, fill it out, attach any supplementary documents, and then post it to them. So that's what I did. I attached the receipt. I wasn't really too hopeful because I thought, oh, they're going to just reject this because they know that I don't have a passport at this moment, so they might just summarily reject it. I wasn't expecting anything. I really wasn't expecting anything. And I went on about, I was a little sad because I hadn't received any notification, but I was expecting nothing. So I went on. And then one day, I think about 15 days after after the deadline, I received an email, and it was about how I was shortlisted for the KGIP, the Korean Government Invitation Program. And they called me for an interview at the embassy, and I couldn't believe it. But I saw it. I think it was one of the most impromptu decisions of my life. And I think it was very coincidental, because I'd never, if I hadn't been in the library at that time, I wouldn't have even known about it. And so it was just very shocking at that time for me to know that the application that I submitted and that I heard just a few days ago, and that I did get shortlisted for, actually it might get me into being actually listed for the invitation program, seemed very, I don't know, it just seemed like a very impossible idea. So all of that came, and the euphoria rushed in, and I called my mother, because I was staying at the dormitory at that time, and I called my mother up and I told her about it. And she was also very much excited, but also very, she was also very scared at that time, because she hadn't really let it. So we were very sheltered kids, and my mother hadn't really thought that I'd be selected, because it was a very nationwide selection program. They'd only select 1 or 2 people from the entire country. And when I went to the embassy for the interview, there were lots of people. I think there were about 40 to 45 shortlisted individuals. And then after the interview, then came, I wasn't really expecting much. And just the thought of having been shortlisted was enough. Just being shortlisted was enough for me at that time. And I was very much content with that. But 4 days after the interview, I received an email about my selection for the Korean government invitation program. And they told me that I was one of the 2 delegates selected for the Korean government invitation program. I really didn't believe it at first.
Sumaira, just a second. Let me put it on pause, because it's a very fascinating story you are telling. And I will just warn the next person that I'm running a bit late. So let me put this on pause, and I'll be back so that you can tell your full story. I've already rescheduled you so many times. I don't want to reschedule anything. So let's just pause it for a minute while I warn the next person that it's going to take a few more minutes, and then I'll be back. Okay. All right. Okay. So pause.
Right.
We are back in the recording. Please continue, Sumaira.
Yes, so the selection email was a very pleasant surprise, and that obviously also startled my mother. And in a week's time, they sent me the invitation letters, the flight itinerary, and everything. And I think my mother wasn't really prepared for all of it. I was, however, and maybe in my own mind, I was a bit scared, I believe. I don't remember being scared though, but I think at the back of my mind, I was a little. But I think on the day of the flight, my mother asked me if she could cancel my flight, and that she'd apologize to the embassy and everything. And I remember my words to her back, and mother, please, I have to go. This is important to me. And that's something along the same lines. That's what I told her. And that's when she kind of accepted it. And then she was crying a lot back then, but I think that was very necessary for me. I flew to South Korea. It wasn't a direct flight. I had a layover in China, and then that happened. The 11 days, they were, to be honest, very much a treat, because I'd always loved studying cultures and languages, but I never even had the possibility of interacting with so many individuals at one place, at a different place, actually. I met people from India. I met people from individual, actually. I met an individual from India. I met an individual from Bangladesh, so many others. Met two very confident young ladies from Sri Lanka, so many other nations. And I know you hate the term, Dr. Mathur, but I met, so all of us South Asians were kind of grouped together, because we kind of understood each other, And that's how we stuck around and they made our group, but they actually made a regional group as well to kind of accommodate everyone. And I think that's how we got also a group together. It was a really fun experience. I went to so many cities. I went to the Samsung Innovation Museum, where that displayed all those artifacts and earlier inventions by Samsung, latest inventions as well, from smartphones to tablets to refrigerators to just everything. It was wonderful, actually. The cuisine was also good because I'm from Pakistan, so I do like spicy food, and most of it was spicy. I'd obviously add kimchi to every dish so that it would bring out the flavor. Those 11 days concluded, and then life went on. And then in 2018 actually, I submitted my application for another program. It was an exchange program. It was about the Women Deliver Young Leaders program. Because as a woman, I'd known how many obstacles and troubles I had to go through to get to where I was. So I wanted to do the same for others, and I wanted to apply to it too, to understand more about how females from other countries adapt, and how they kind of reform their structures, not just institutional structures, but also the legal rules and regulations, also policies and rules. So I submitted my application for that, I think, only an hour before the deadline, because I was still hesitant. I was still very uncertain because I didn't want to face a rejection. And in between that time and the conclusion of the Korean government invitation program, I'd received so many rejections for so many other programs. I didn't want to face another rejection. So but I went ahead and did apply, because I think a friend of mine on that day told me about how she really loved going to different places and understanding people and learning and learning and kind of revising her thinking about so many other cultures. And that prompted me to submit my application. So I did that. And then after 6 months, because I think that was a very long process with them, because I think there were too many applications, because it wasn't a national selection, it was an international selection, a global selection of Women Deliver Young Leaders, and they had about 7,000 to 8,000 applications, and they only had to select 3,000 applications, I don't remember, but they only had to select 300 applicants for the program. And I think 6 months, after 6 months, I'd received an email, and again I was surprised, but I think it wasn't as much of a surprise as the KGIP was. But again, I was very grateful for another opportunity, and that allowed me to study. There was an online course for us on how we could incorporate many practices that advanced female rights and basically women rights into our laws and regulations. And so I enrolled in that course, completed it, and then after a year in 2019, all young leaders were sent an invite to attend the Women Deliver Young Leaders summit in Vancouver, Canada. So I went to Vancouver in 2019. It was only a 4-day event, because 3 days were reserved for the conference and 1 day for going and then returning. It was a very long trip. It was my first ever long trip. I think it took about, because Vancouver is at the very end of Canada, the very other end tip, and it took about 24 hours to get to Canada and Vancouver, and it was just I wasn't exhausted by the end, but all that adrenaline rush did kind of wear me out by the end of it. So that's what happened. And then in my final year, I remember in December 2019, when noise about COVID started, I think it was my second last semester in November, December. Yes, it was about to conclude in January, and then everything shifted online. And only two months before that, I was accepted into the South Asia Students for Liberty local coordinator program that my friend Isra is also a part of, was a part of. And I think that was that had a very big impact on my life, has had a very big impact on my life, because I was pushed into COVID, starting a new semester online, completing my thesis, and while continuing an internship at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also handling Students for Liberty South Asia as a local coordinator. I wasn't too active as a local coordinator in the first 2 months because I had everything all laid out for me at various other organizations and at my own university. And I was just so engrossed in all of them that I didn't really have time. And also I didn't want to receive too much attention, because that organizing an event meant being the center and being in front of so many people, and that stage fright, that was still very much a part of me, scared me a lot. And I think I was able to organize one in-person event before everything shut down.
Okay.
And everything was just digital.
Okay.
But yes, I started out as a local coordinator, then went on, and then everything became online. So I started by just attending and joining webinars and different events, not really organizing ones myself, because again, I was still very much afraid of being at the center of attention. I just didn't want to. Also because Students for Liberty had active coordinators from other countries. So we were from South Asia Students for Liberty. So while I had interacted with people from India, people from Bangladesh, I still thought that they would consider me, I don't know, I just had this thought, I thought they'd consider me as a troublemaker, as a nuisance, because I wasn't very active, and also because of the things that happened in the past, in our country's past. So I thought that would be an obstacle in me becoming friends or being actually co-organizing events together. But since it was a very completely online atmosphere and online setting, I think I was able to overcome that in a while, because people are very friendly, have always been very friendly at South Asia Students for Liberty. And I don't know, I just started making friends all of a sudden, because they'd always remember my name from different other webinars, and they'd call my name and say, "Oh, we know you attended our other webinar and you were there." And that's how I sort of came out of this shell of mine, and then also kind of tried becoming more receptive. And I think it was around that time when CCS, I'm not sure if you know about CCS, it's a very prominent think tank in India, Center for Civil Society. They started, I think they sent out a few of their invitations to their online courses, and some flyers were also published online. And that's when I registered for the online course, because I think I did win something, and I was able to use that money for that course. And I enrolled in that course by CCS. It was Introduction to Public Policy, CCS's course on public policy. So I went ahead and started that course. And in that course, we had people from the Students for Liberty South Asia as well, so it felt really homey, because I had people from my own club, you could say, or from my own organization. So it felt really, but I would never really write my country's name in the comments because I felt that if I did, people would judge me or something. So I didn't. And it was a very personal choice. I just wanted people to see me as very much an individual, as someone who was very much a learner like themselves, and not really as a national of a different country, especially a neighboring country. So I just wanted to maintain that and keep that image.
Okay, so
I think
we
the
are
word
running out of even the extended time. So why don't you shift to your future and tell us your thinking, if any, because you seem to be going from success to success. You always are surprised by your own success, but by now you shouldn't be surprised by your success, because all of us get rejections, but you get enough acceptances. So I'd just like to hear from you, your current situation and the future, so that we know where you are going.
So I'm currently also I do apologize for taking too much time. I am
No,
a
no, it's
little
good,
worried.
but
Yes, I
it's
know.
pretty long. Mostly people are 30-35 minutes. Anyway, let's not talk about the time. Just tell us where you are now and what your thinking is in the future.
So I'm currently the regional coordinator at South Asian Students for Liberty for the Khyber region, which includes both Afghanistan and Pakistan. So I look over the coordinators from both Afghanistan and Pakistan. And mind you, when the Taliban takeover happened, some of my coordinators, many of my coordinators from Afghanistan and I lost our communication with each other. So that was a very troubling experience. But since then, I've really kind of made it so that both coordinators from Pakistan and Afghanistan can collaborate together, although albeit in a very digital setting. But yes, and I'm also the editor of an online journal / magazine. You could call it a hybrid, because we're not too strict and formal when it comes to publishing guidelines and submission guidelines, but we're also very accepting of other pieces that center around landscape, culture, language, etc. It's kind of a hybrid. I'm an editor for the website called Paradigm Shift. We've been moving more towards interviews while also maintaining while also maintaining a very a reputation for and credible pieces. Besides that, I intend to study for my master's degree abroad. I haven't been able to get any scholarships yet. So some of the failures, I think they are failures or maybe setbacks. I haven't been able to secure a scholarship yet. I did try applying to lots of places, but I haven't been able to get one yet. But I'm a very persistent woman, so I will continue to try and get a scholarship. I do intend to pursue a degree in public policy or economics, one after the other. I don't really know in what order, but I do intend to study both public policy and economics separately, because I really got into studying got into learning economics while I was a local coordinator at South Asia Students for Liberty. So that's, and I also want to understand more about how policies are made. I'm not really sure where I'll be in the next 5 years, but hopefully I'll be at a think tank understanding how policies, how laws can really determine, or how rather individuals can understand, comprehend and determine policies, while also respecting the policymakers' views, while also so kind of bridging the gap between both the policymaker and the individuals, but kind of making sure that the public has a much bigger say than the policymakers, because the policy is for the public, so it is very much their voice and for them, not the other way around.
Okay, that's great. Do you have any words of advice for your juniors?
I think well, I never really thought about giving advice to other people, especially juniors, but something I always say to my local coordinators whenever I hold an orientation meeting or hold an orientation session is to really plan out first. I'm not really a big fan of unorganized or very much a chaotic lifestyle. I have almost everything planned. They don't really go as planned, but I do try to make an effort into planning my daily life and my future life as well. So I would like people to kind of understand where they're at, to kind of plan out, chalk out their own future, write down the skills that they have, write down the skills that they want to learn, because it's a very evolving world, and I know it's very chaotic as well, but and everyone wants to be recognized and appreciated, so they do kind of seem to go, I don't know, lost in the way. But I just would like people to understand that even though you haven't figured it all out, I haven't figured it all out, to be honest. A few weeks earlier, so I was thinking of something that I was thinking of another plan for my future, and so it will change. Just kind of create a blueprint for yourself so that you at least know what you have at the moment, what you've achieved at the moment. So when you are facing setbacks, you actually go back to that blueprint and see what you have achieved or what you have done or what you've come to do or overcome, be it in your personal life, your professional life, or academic life.
Okay, that's very good, Sumaira. Let me just ask you, I ask everyone, do you have any last thing you want to say?
Not really. I just hope that many more people, especially youth, are able to share their voice, share their concerns, share where they're at, share their own life experiences, because that's something that I've also wanted to do. I've never been a fan of interviews. I never really think I can be a fan of interviews. But it's something that I do think is important. And when my friend told me about this and suggested me to go to be interviewed, I was hesitant and uncertain. But you just have to gather enough courage to go for it, because opportunities only come once your way, and then once you've passed out on that opportunity, you won't ever be able to get it back again. So might as well just go for it, and whatever the outcome may be, at least you've tried.
Okay,
So
well, thank you, Sumaira. I'd love to have you back in 6 months or a year, whenever you have some major achievement to your credit and you want to share it with us. And till then, let's say bye to the viewers. I'll be back with another young person, this time maybe from India or some other country. And till then, bye, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.